Hey everybody, I'm glad you're here. I'm Shawn Page, and I'm going to be talking to you about some assessment things that we use for acuity and effective assessment planning. And so be sure that if you have any questions or anything, you're hitting in the question box. And then also there is a live chat, and so make sure we're paying attention and getting our stuff in that chat. I got something to put on there for us to start out. So if money and time were no object, where would you most like to go on vacation? So to encourage you to get in the chat, go ahead and put that in there, and let us know what you think. So again, I'm glad that everybody is here, and I'm ready to get started. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our vision for our school, and everything we do is focused on that vision. And why that's important is that acuity actually helps us support a lot of those things that we're looking at. So I'm so glad that you guys are here, and so here we go. We're going to get started. Just want to talk to you a little bit about these are our commitments to our students and to ourselves. And so as a school, we have decided that these are the pieces that are most important to us. And so this is what we absolutely want to make sure that we're providing to our kids. And so when we look at Hattie's work, we're looking at the at effect sizes of what we're working on. And so we know that student self-reported grades and students setting expectations is a #1 effect size, and so that's one of the things we focus on. We also focus on assessment for learning, and so we're committed to using backwards design, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about that kind of stuff. And then also the effect of our response intervention, and so we'll talk about how we use acuity and it supports us that way. And then, of course, giving great feedback. And so you know, these are the 5 things that our school is committed to. And so on most of these things, with the exception, and I could probably make the argument of the effect of student-teacher relationships, because as we're supporting our kids in their learning process and in their learning journey, we are effectively increasing the relationships that we have with our students. And so we use acuity to do all of these different things. And so I'm going to talk about that just a little bit, and then we'll get into kind of our what we use for our assessment, our assessment system that we use, and hopefully answer any questions that you have. So the first thing that we do is when we're looking at developing our system of instruction, is we start with the end in mind. And so we come from Rick Stiggins' work, and that's where we've started at. And so we identify first thing before we start anything, what do we want our kids to know? And so and then the thing that we do with that is we power standard. So we'll look at our state standards. We break those down, figure out which ones are going to be our priority standards, and then we go about developing our assessments and our performance events, and we do that using acuity. And so that's kind of an important tool that we have. It gives us a pretty good schematic of the standards, and it also gives us some nice rigorous questions that we can use. And then really what we do mostly is we use the custom test builder. So you know, the custom test builder for us, it just seems to work. We have used the predictive tests. We have used I have used diagnostic tests. We've used all those pieces, but this assessment system that we're currently using seems to work the best for us. And so you know, I've been using Acuity now. I think I'm in my 10th year, so almost since it came out. So just explored a lot inside there, and we just that custom test piece is just that's what we use the most. So I just kind of give you a glimpse, if you haven't gotten there to see. We have custom test builder, and I just gave a couple of slides. You know, I think that pretty much everybody has that. Some people are a little bit afraid of doing that. Like I said, we really, really dive into that. We write our own questions and our own performance events. We have our, we have our own custom question bank that we use. We just really kind of crank on this particular feature of Acuity, and so works really, really well for us. So so the next thing that one of the things that we said was, we're committed to giving really strong feedback to our kids, and so we use a pre and post test, and we do that about monthly. Now that changes obviously according to the learning, because student learning is at the center of what we do, and so if students need to take a break, or they need to we need to spend a few more days on something, our basic guideline is about a pre and post test monthly. Now that might be 3 weeks and it might be 6 weeks depending on what we're covering, but that's our general rule of thumb. And so in that inside Acuity, our students monitor their own progress, and so they're very much into reading the reports, and they look at the distractor analysis. They look at all those pieces together, and then they set goals according to what they need to do. And so I'll talk a little bit about our goal setting that we do, and then probably the most important piece that they do is the students reflect on their own learning. So, and we have students and parents, our students and our parents and our teachers, they conference about monthly based on what performance is. And so, and we look at a few different measures, but Acuity is definitely one of the big ones that we look at, because it gives us really good, reliable feedback as to what we want. As to what we want to make sure that if we're saying a student's got it, then we know they got it. If they need help, that we're getting them the help that they need. So the main things that we use to give student feedback is we use the assessment report, because we feel like we can drill down easily on that. Our students have one-to-one laptops, and so they have access to read their reports, their own individual reports, and we basically take PDFs with them, and they can see what they're doing well, and then what they're needing help with. And so, and then we also use the item analysis report to give them feedback as well. It gives them really straight, exactly what they're missing. Also gives them a sample of the question, and then from there they can drill down and they can do distractor analysis to get even a better understanding and a deeper understanding of where their misunderstanding is and what they can do to correct that. So this is an example of the assessment report, and so it kind of gives you the pieces. It really, the thing that's nice about it is from here you can go directly in and assign instructional resources to kids, and we do use that feature a lot. And so that's part of this piece. The feedback part and our monthly assessments are really, that's what drives our day-to-day instruction. And so we really spend a lot of time looking at that, and then when we develop our assessments, we develop them with and build in reflection time. So it's just an important thing for us to do for our kids. And so if we know that we're going to spend a day assessing, then we are going to make sure that we give time so that they can do reflection and conference. And so we feel like it's worth the time and the effort to do that. So Acuity just gives us kind of something to sit down and talk about, and we can be really pointed with it. So the next part is this next slide I'm showing you is that's the item analysis that kids can look at. and then the teachers can click on the blue links as well and show the actual question and do some other things with that. So, but our kids look at this and they figure out what they got correct and what they need help with, and then they go from there. And so they make whatever adjustments they need to make, and then they write goals against that piece. And so we really just use this just for formative information, just to find out where our kids are at. That's Acuity does a great job of supporting us with that feedback piece. Here's an example of a distractor analysis, and so kids can look at that, and like I said, we try to be transparent, and so we want our kids to see, this why they picked the wrong answer and that type of thing. And so it just gives us rich feedback to help with our kids. So the other important thing that we do is, when we're looking at students self-assessing and going and finding out what they need to know and how to communicate with teachers. So we make sure that we give them opportunity to goal set, and so they'll look at those little monthly kind of probes that we're giving them, and they'll set goals, very specific goals against that, using that distractor, using that item analysis. And so they'll look at that, and they'll goal set based on that pretest data, and then they go through and they'll communicate to teachers specific reports or specific supports that they need to be successful. And so we've been doing this for a while, and so our students have a very clear picture of what we want as far as goal setting and their self-monitoring. So we've trained them to do that, and Acuity just continues to help us with that. So here's an example of what we do for goal setting. It's very simple. We use Google Forms to do that. It goes through and, we get all the students' information. We have everything that we need. And, we want to know how did they achieve their goal, what was the standard that they were working on. And Acuity kind of gives us that. Those little formative pieces give us that. The other nice thing about the formative pieces is that we're not taking a grade or anything for that, and so we can really go and spend a lot of time discussing things that kids are having a difficulty with. And so we can also discuss that with our parents, and then kind of prescribe some things that the parents can help us with at home, and then I'll talk a little bit about our intervention system later. So, but this really, I would say, out of everything, this is what gets kids really involved in Acuity testing. I hear a lot of things from colleagues, oh, my kids don't take it seriously, or, doesn't do that. And I see, Holly, that you're losing audio, so I'm not sure what's going on. I'm talking on the phone like they told me to. So, but we'll try to get that worked out. So when we look at this goal setting piece, it's super important that the kids are involved in it, and that really gets them motivated to continue with the Acuity testing. So they consider our Acuity testing an important part of their learning process. So. And then I just have more, how am I going to achieve my goal? And we ask kids to be very specific what they're going to do, if they're going to attend tutoring, if they're going to go into our intervention process, what they need to do at home, whether they need access after school to our Wi-Fi and internet system. So there's a number of things they put there. So, and then at the end, we want them to have it. We want them to have a final reflection, and so we spend time with them reflecting on that formative feedback piece. So I talked a little bit about our intervention system. When kids don't get it, we make sure that we have an intervention system in place for them. And so as our teachers are looking at that assessment analysis and the item analysis for their students, we're able to really pull out the kids and be specific at the kids that have some deficits. and that want to, and so we want to get them some prescribed pieces. So we give them the educational resources that Acuity has, and then we're just really precise. We kind of go in with a scalpel and really help kids specifically with what they're in difficulty with. And so one of the real strengths probably of what we do is, especially with that pre and post formative feedback, we give really, really quick feedback. So on that. So we have, and also we have evidence of true growth. And so as we're looking at that, we know what they came in with on their pre-test, and then at the end we study their post-test on that. So we look at that. And I see I have a question about what grade level do students start creating this goal sheet. We actually, in my particular school, is 6th to 8th grade. However, we use the same sheet all the way down into 3rd grade. And so when they're able to manage that sheet, obviously the level of complexity gets different and the expectation gets different, but we use the same goal setting sheet all the way up to the 8th grade. So that was a good question. So now when we look at Acuity assessment supports for our intervention, it's really what drives getting the kids the help they need. So we do a lot of stuff with student leadership, and so we have a time set off in our day where students go to clubs or they go in and they get extra help, and so we have that time set up on our day to get that. So what Acuity does, it just helps us to really pinpoint what we needed to, what we need to get to our kids. So those small probes, it just really kind of helps us to continue with the vision for what we want our school to be. So we have an assessment strategy, and so at the beginning of the year, so when we look at our big picture of our assessment strategy, I kind of talked to you about how Acuity supports our long-term vision and goals with student learning, and so now I want to talk to you a little bit about the whole big picture of our assessment strategy. So at the beginning of the year, we pre-test over all the power standards we're going to cover for that year. So we custom build that test, and we know that our students don't know some of that information, but we do know that they know a lot of them, and so we do that to really adjust how we're teaching our kids. And so then we have the formative assessments that I talked about, and they're approximately once per month, and that's just based on performance of the pretest. And so they're pre and post testing in small increments as well. And so that beginning of the year just kind of gives us a big picture of what we're going to need to accomplish for the year, and then our teachers go in and they make adjustments to their pacing guides and to their units of instruction, and then they make they adjust according to what our kids need. So we're adjusting big picture, and then we adjust on the kind of the day-to-day instruction as well, using those formative assessments basically once per month. And then we do a performance event, and we do that approximately every 3 months. And so our formative assessments are, looking at maybe 1 or 2 standards, and so it's really kind of chunking that information down. And so when we get to our performance event, we're going to ask students to perform tasks that are much more complex in nature. So they're going to put a lot of the concepts together and have them work together in kind of real world applications. We're going to look to see, how can they assimilate that information, how can they adapt to the standards, and we want to make sure that when we're doing the performance event, it really increases the rigor. And so those little formative pieces are just looking at like individual standards and getting kids help, and then we're looking at that performance event is telling us do the kids truly have it? Do they truly have mastery in that? So, so we have the beginning, our beginning pretest. Like I said, it's the assessment of all of our power standards. It identifies where our kids are, and it sets our baseline for our growth. And so Missouri does have as part of their evaluation, this is not the most important piece, but as part of Missouri's teacher evaluation, they evaluate based on growth. And so our beginning of the year assessment really sets that baseline for growth. So we're using that information to see, did kids truly grow over a longer period of time? And the other thing that it does, that pre-test that we do at the beginning of the year, is we use that to identify our PD and our coaching cycle targets. And so we are blessed and have instructional coaches in our building, and so our instructional coaches will look at that beginning of the year data and see where our students' deficits are, and then provide PD specific to that those deficits. And so we use that to guide our professional development throughout the year. And so we make sure that if kids are having a hard time with the positives, then we're going to go and we're going to make sure our teachers know how to support our kids in doing that, and we're going to give them excellent instruction and keep going, and Acuity just helps us to pinpoint that. And then our students do set long-term goals as well. So we have short-term goals as well as long-term goals, and so they can see the short pieces, and then they can see the long piece, and so they can track their continued growth. So that's kind of how our beginning pretest is a pretty important piece to us. And then again, we talked about our formative assessments, but that's our short testing probe. It has a very limited amount of standards that we put on there. It really monitors our teaching practices, and so and we want to make sure that our kids are on target for their short-term goals. So and then it drives everything that we do. And so if we have kids that need help in certain areas, then we are tutoring them, and we are pulling them into interventions and doing everything that we can to get them that specific help they need. And then I've talked about that already. All right, so then we look at our performance events. And our performance events, it's multiple strategies combined. So, and they have, the performance events have some really rigorous questions in there in the bank, but we also customize our own performance events. And so we look at that all the time to make sure that we're making adjustments, and we're making the right decisions. So if we're saying a kid has mastered a concept, then we are going to make sure that we have evidence of that, and that really comes in our performance event. So and I've got a couple of examples to kind of show you how that works. So I got a question from Richard. And his question is, are the power standards the basic skill areas in standardized testing, such as reading, comp, math, etc.? Yeah, that's basically what they are. We have Missouri standards. They were called the Common Core. They've changed it to that. And so we look at those. There's way too many for us to make and to get. And so we do our best. And we break down the ones that are super important. So that's what it is. That was a good question. And then I got a question from Julie, and it says, when do you meet with teachers to review data and conference? And we do not do half day with a sub. It's part of our process. We do have Friday early outs, and we do have a data team that goes through and looks at the data and makes sure that that's make sure that that's part of what we're. I lost my train of thought there. Excuse me. So we make sure that the teachers understand the data and that we're making a plan accordingly. So we do that during a Friday early outs. Our teachers also have common plan time, and I meet with our teachers at least 3 times a month in a kind of almost a formal conference setting, and at least 1 time out of those 3 times we're talking about data. So it's always in the forefront. So the other thing that we really like about the performance events is they're in line with like real world problem solving. So when you see, I'll show you an example of one. When you see it, you can see that it all kind of just, it's all real things that we have to solve in real life. And so it's really moving away more towards that standards-based testing piece, and looking at more application of concepts. And so that's one of the big leverage pieces of using performance events is that we can really see if our kids got it or not. So I've got an example there. Here's an example question of what might be on a performance event. This is one of Acuity's test questions that they have in there, and so it's asking multiple pieces. It's asking to find percentages. It's asking to write a linear inequality and a linear equation as well, and also to look at some budget pieces and some things like that. And so you can see that when a kid sees this, we might say that they've mastered a concept from a standards system or standards testing system, but we can't truly say that until we see that they've been able to perform against the performance event. And so this is an important piece of what we do, an important piece of getting the right information to our kids so that it's actionable data, and they can look at that and make some decisions. Say, yeah, I was able to figure out percentages, but I wasn't able to, apply them in a different setting to where, I could adapt and I could assimilate the information. And so we want them to be high-level thinkers, and so we're able to use the performance task to help us get to that piece of what we need. So this is another part. This would be the second part of the question. It talks about costs and graphing. It wants them to complete an inequality, write the greatest number of days per week the company can advertise. And so you can see this is a pretty complex task, and it does take us a while. And so these are usually, they'll take us anywhere from an hour to 2 hours to complete them, depending on how complex we built them. And but it gives us great information for what we need to move forward and to make sure that kids are getting the kind of instruction and the kind of help they need with the way they're going to be asked to think in the future. And so we think it's worth the time. And again, in this performance event, we make sure that we have time built in for teachers to reflect, for students to reflect, for them to conference, and those types of things. So we do invest quite a bit of time in the performance assessment, but we feel like it's worth it in the long run. The other piece is it really has helped to get my teachers to realize how rigorous they need to make their instruction. And so if this is how we're asking our students to, if this is what we're going to ask them to perform, then we need to be supporting them with that level of instruction so that they're able to do that. And so what we've really seen is that, the formative piece and the pre-test at the beginning of the year, that's kind of the way we've done business for a while when we started with standards testing. And but when we look at the performance event, that's kind of what we're wanting to do in the future. And so we're trying to combine and balance those pieces, and we feel like we have a pretty good balance between doing the standards way, and then also doing these performance events. Now, these performance events are also based on the standards, but it's multiple concepts, and so one of the downfalls of giving standardized testing is that it tends to be very linear, and this is kind of a roundabout instruction over a lot of different concepts, which is what we do in real life. So really getting kids to think and making that our priority. So we do a mid-year summative post-test, and we do that. That is it's the counterpart to the one we do at the beginning of the year. And what that does, it contains all the power standards, and we know that we haven't covered all of them yet, but we want to monitor progress. And so what this gives us is it kind of gives us a place to bounce off of to see what we've done a good job of getting kids to understand, and the things that we need to adjust mid-year. And so we've experimented with this. We've done a summative at the end of the year after after our map. We call it our map testing, but actually our testing cycle. And it just wasn't as successful, and it didn't give us the kind of information that we wanted. And so the other piece was, we're doing a lot of testing, and sometimes our testing will take our state testing will take 3 or 4 weeks. And so when we're working on that, it's kind of a nightmare to have kids complete their state testing and then go in and do another test. And so we move that to mid-year, and so it gives us a lot of really good information. So we can identify right where students are right at the middle of the year. We still have time to intervene. We still have time to get them help. It gives us a decent platform to determine if our kids are growing, and so we can look at that at mid-year and start making some decisions as to what we need to do that. And it also helps us to modify our professional development and to see how our coaches are doing. They look at that data and they say, well, we really brought it up on using, for example, if we want to do something simple, using commas, but we're still lousy at using periods. And so they'll go in and they'll change that and make that very fluid to finish out the year, to make sure that our kids know the things they're supposed to know. So the other piece is at the middle of the year that the students really reflect on their performance and their goals. And so they look at that piece and they say, hey, I haven't put the time in that I needed to, and so at mid-year I can see that if I'm going to be successful, I'm going to need to buckle up and get my work done. And so it really helps them at that point. So and it gives growth opportunities. So it lets us know what do we need to review for the remainder of the year as well. So we're just really trying to get good information in our teachers' hands to make sure we're doing everything that we possibly can to get kids the information they need to be successful. So here's some key things that we have learned over the time, and then I'm going to open it up to any questions they might have. One of the things that I've worked on the past 10 years with Acuity is that, I think it has some really powerful data and some really powerful pieces, but it's only powerful if it's in the hands of our kids. And so I've looked at that over the years, and I think when I started, I kept the data to myself, and then I started sharing it with my teachers, and then eventually we evolved into sharing it with our kids. And so there's tons and tons of stuff you can do in there, and tons of data and different charts you can look at to provide what kind of information you need. But really, for us, we do the best when we keep it simple. And so we use a limited amount of data, but we use it well. And so it really helps us to hone down with our kids. And so data really has to be in the hands of kids, in my opinion. And so teaching them to use the tools and to do the things that they need to do to take control of their own learning is a really big priority for us and for our staff. And so, you can get Acuity, and I've worked with people for a long time, and they'll say sometimes, "Oh, it's not working." Well, it works. I've had successful schools now for the last 10 years as an administrator, and a lot of it is based on the information we get out of Acuity. And so, but you have to be willing to take a risk and kind of dive down and get in there with the kids and get in there with teachers and teach them how to use it. And once they have that tool in their hands, they can really go big. So that gets me to the next part is, looking at it, too much data kind of bogs the process down. And so I think you can throw a lot of reports at people. You can give them a lot of different stuff. You can test more often than we do. You can, and not use the data, and it does you absolutely no good. And so, especially when you're looking at something like a performance event, it's going to be 2 hours, and so we are a junior high setting, and so that basically means that I'm giving up 2 sections. And so if I'm going to invest in that 2 sections, I've got to use the data. And so I want it to be data that's going to be useful and actionable for my teachers right away. And so one of the things I would encourage you, if you're an administrator, just don't bog your folks down with all kinds of data. Giving them small pieces and starting out like that is much better than using every single tool that Acuity has, because it is an impressive data machine. And so, but it's one of the things that we've learned, that too much data bogs the process. We consider ourselves a lean, mean fine machine, and so we only assess the data that we're going to use. So otherwise, if we're not going to use the data, then we don't do the assessment. So that's kind of how we go. So the other piece that we've really learned that is a key to being successful in any assessment that you decide to do is, if you're going to assess, you've got to build time in, not only for the assessment, but for the goal setting and the reflection conferences. Those are probably the most important piece. Like I said, I've been an administrator for a long time, and when people say, "Well, I just didn't have any time to go over the assessment," my statement to them is, you don't have time not to go over the assessment. So it is so important that we're sharing with our kids and we're developing that learning relationship with them. And so we go in there and we make sure that we build that time in, and that's part of our assessment schedule. That's part of what our assessment strategy is how much time we're going to build in for goal setting and reflection conferences. And so, and whether you're a teacher or administrator, my particular role is what gets monitored gets done. And so I am looking at those goal setting pieces. I'm looking at the student reflection pieces. I might not be looking at all of them, but I'm looking at, I've got probably out of my population, I've got at least 50 kids that I'm looking really deep into their information, and I'm asking questions so that my teachers know that we're going to look. This is our priority, and we're gonna continue to give the kids the information that they need. So the other pieces that I thought, that when I really think about how we've been a successful school, is, we started small, and we had a clear vision of what we wanted for our assessment strategy. And so you can kind of see, when we look at the first slide, or the second slide, was talking about student learning and all those pieces. I mean, we came up with that together, and so we had a very, very clear vision of what we wanted our kids to be able to do. So, and what we wanted our assessment strategy to do. So, you know, I would encourage you to make sure you sit down with your educators and whoever your teams are, and really get that pounded out, and then figure out how Acuity can support those things in there. So I'm your partner in learning. I'm not employed by Acuity. I've used the product for a long time, and so I happen to have a lot of information about implementation and that type of thing, and can use the machine very well. And so I'm your partner in learning. And so if you need to get a hold of me or you have questions, here's my information. I am active on Twitter. I do a lot of speaking for other engagements. And so if you ever need me, then I'm here for you. So at this point, I'll take any questions. If you want to continue to give questions in the question section, then I will continue to answer those. So I think Sherilyn, she asked what grade level do students start creating this goal sheet, and at third grade, actually. So are there any other questions that you? Okay, good. From Richard, we have are the summative assessments you make provided by a company according to a specific subject area and goals. So we develop our own summative assessments. We do use some of the question bank that Acuity has. We also make our own. You know, we make our own questions as well. So depending on what we want. So you know. If there are any more questions that you have, go ahead and put them in the queue, and I'll be happy to answer those. So Linda asked, how do you assess students that enroll throughout the year? We have high enrollment mobility. Hey, Linda, you're like my sister. We have 53% transient rate. So we have students that come and go. That means 53% of the kids that we start with, we will not have at the end of the year. And so that is something that we do. So we give them that beginning summative assessment. So we have a person in our library that helps support us with that. And so they come right in, they take that assessment, we assess where they're at, and we instantly just start giving them the information and the supports that they need to get there. So we don't waste any time with that. Before we even schedule them, they're in there taking that assessment. So that was a good question. And again, I'll take any questions that you have. Okay, so Linda, you asked, do you have Google Forms available to review for the decision-making process? So I'm not sure. Can you be a little bit more specific on your question, Linda? Because I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm certainly willing to share any of our forms that we have as far as the goal-setting piece. So as far as the decision-making process, I guess I'm not sure what you're asking me there. Decision-making process in regards to building the assessments, or I'm not sure. If you could be more specific, it'd be great. Charlotte Bard asked if it was cost effective for a school servicing less than 50 students. I would say it is. As far as looking at it as compared to some other options, I've worked with the other options as well. It's less expensive, and the thing that it really brings is it brings a level of professionalism to your school. And so even though you have less than 50 students, you are still able to give such a wealth of information to your parents and to your stakeholders about where your kids are, and then be able to make decisions about what you need to be doing to get those things and to help support the kids. So I would, that to me it would be worth it. And you're not talking about a big, you're not talking about a big expense, but it gives a lot of great information that can really help your teachers, so they're not spinning their wheels around. They're getting very specific. So I think that if you have the money to do that, it would be really super beneficial to your students and to your teachers. So Linda gave us some clarification. Decision making for providing intervention or targeted strategies. We do have a form that we go through with that, and I'd be happy to share that with you if you want to email me at the email that's on there, Linda. I will share the form. I'll share the forms that we have with you, and so that will not be an issue. So, and then Linda, we also use a reading assessment and some other assessments to make decisions on our intervention strategies, and so those really help us as well too. And so we kind of look at a battery of. I have a special ed background, and so we look at a few different levels of testing to see where we can provide the most help for our students. So that was a good question. So I got a question from Richard. Is there a time crunch administering these tests? Considering public schools also conduct standardized tests like the FCAT. Okay, so we have the same kind of deal as that, Richard. And we're able to get it managed. The key is the reason why we use a custom assessment is because we can control the size that way, and so we can get a pretty good idea of where kids are at. We're not using it for validity, and so that's not what we're interested in. We're interested in assessing them for what they know and what they can do. And so we're not giving them a ton of tests on it. So with the exception of that, the performance event is a longer test. But the formative assessments that we do are very, very short. Even the semester, the pre-test and semester tests we give are very short as well. So we're looking at maybe 4 questions on a formative assessment, and we're looking at maybe 20 questions at the most on that summative question, that summative sheet. So we're not talking about big assessments, with the exception of the performance event, which is pretty big. So. I kind of understand what you're up against. We have the same piece, so it is it's a lot of assessment if you're not using the data. The nice thing about it is that I don't have to wait 4 months to get my information from the state. So I'm getting my information that day, or I'm getting it the next day. So that's where I really get the it really gives me some actionable information. And so, and I don't know how the FCAT is, but I know here in Missouri, it it could be until October until we get information from last year's assessments. So just try to get stuff. I try to get stuff as quick as I can within 24 hours to kids so that they know what to do. So when we know how to help them. So I got a question from Linda. Looking at your data, were students? Yes. Were there students that were not successful with their goals? If so, what might have been the cause? That's a great question. And here's the deal, Linda. There are kids that are that way. And so what our kids do is, and our teachers do, is when they're conferencing, they talk to them about those pieces. And so some of the time what we look at is, it might be a lack of effort on the student's part. And so that's one of the reasons why we take parents as a partner in our conferencing to, we look at that and we talk to the parents about it and say, well, they have this goal and this is what they need from you to make the goal happen. And so we really take them as a partner. And so there are kids that don't reach it, and we also have kids that we throw everything that we have at them, and they're giving us everything they've got, and we continue to remediate and we continue to do those things, and they're still not getting it. And so but we use that piece to also look and see, do we need to go to a tier 3 intervention with special education, and look at that piece too. But before we do that, we have a battery of assessment that we've looked at, and we have all those interventions in place that show that this kid still is not progressing, and we need some extra support. And so I would say, in that extreme case, we maybe have 1 or 2 kids a year that's the case. Usually what the case is that they're, they said they were going to come in for tutoring, or they said that they were going to look over some flipped classroom stuff that the teacher had and come in and spend some extra time studying and doing that kind of stuff, and they don't follow through. And so we hold them accountable to that. And so we just work on those things together, just like real life, and look and see what could they have done better. So Charlotte Baird asked, we currently assess our students with Terra Nova. Would it make sense to replace Terra Nova? Would it make sense to use Terra Nova or MH as a supplement? So in my previous school, we used Terra Nova as well, but we ended up replacing it with Acuity. We just seem to get better information from Acuity, and it's more actionable. And the other piece was, as far as using it with kids, it was just much more user-friendly. And in our mission, in our endeavor to go one-to-one and to use that kind of platform, we really liked McGraw-Hill. The other piece is it got them used to taking all of our state assessments are on computer, and so they get used to using similar tools at similar rigor, that kind of stuff. So that's why we made the decision to change. I think Terra Nova gives you some good information, but I've always kind of felt Acuity is Terra Nova on steroids. So, and then I got something from Richard. Where can we find samples of the type of tests you're utilizing? So I teach middle school language arts. Are there any websites? So I don't know that they have any websites. I know that when you put your assessments into Acuity, that they're there. I'd be happy to try to send you something of an example of what we've used. That wouldn't be a problem, Richard. If you want to email me, I can I can attempt to do that for you. There is a pretty extensive bank of questions in there. So obviously if you subscribe to it, there's thousands and thousands of questions in there that can help you push up those language, any of your language arts needs. So, and there's tons of stuff in the middle school language arts, particularly. So the one thing that if you're gonna build, the one thing that I would caution against is, we make sure that we have a reading passage, and as we're doing a reading passage, that we'll have maybe 2 or 3 questions associated with that, so that it's not reading as reading intensive, more as that content extensive. So. Again, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I think we can